This is the Transport Workers Union's report on the 1953 bus strike of Local 100. A strike to win a 40-hour week with no loss in take-home pay for 8,200 employees on 9 privately owned bus lines operating in the city of New York. On New Year's Eve in New York's Times Square, thousands jammed the streets, braved the bitter winds of a snowy winter night to ring the New Year in. But there were no cheers. There was no celebration a few blocks away. Grim, determined TWU members answered the strike call, set up their picket lines at the midnight deadline. There had been months of endless negotiations without a decent offer. There was no chance for settlement. TWU's only hope for victory was to strike. Television networks and newsreel services got the facts on the biggest news story of the year from Michael J. Quill, TWU International President.
Well, Mr. Quill, how's your turnout on the picket lines tonight?
Well, we've just established the picket line here at 54th Street and 9th Avenue, one of the main garages of the omnibus system. And the latest report from Transport Hall is that the picket lines went up on schedule in front of all garages of the 9 private bus companies at 12 midnight.
What's your big issue?
Our big issue is the question of the 40-hour week, something that's established in industry all over the United States for many years.
And how did we happen to have the strike, the pickets coming out tonight?
We had a strike because there was a breakdown in negotiations. The mayor of the city of New York, Vincent Imperatori, did not live up to his obligation to the people. And we faced the blame for this strike of 8,200 men giving service to 3.5 million people daily. We faced the blame squarely at the doorstep of Mayor Imperatori and his advisors in City Hall.
The strike was on. At the midnight deadline, the big buses pulled into the barns at the end of their runs. Off-duty workers from all over the city reported into their locations and signed in for strike assignments. At 26 locations, workers out of the shops or just off their runs joined fellow workers on the picket lines. January 1st, 1953, a city recovering from a gigantic New Year's Eve hangover discovered a new headache in the transit nerve centers of New York. Every bus of every privately owned bus company was off the streets. 3.5 million bus riders enjoyed a new experience. A delightful ride, a comfortable, carefree subway trip. Some walked. As TWU members walked their picket lines, and TWU officers walked the picket lines also at every location, they found the strike solid. The next day, the bus riders went underground again. They hoped Mayor Imperatori would solve the problem, get the buses rolling. The mayor's solution was presented on television January 3rd. 1 hour later over television, union officers exposed his phony plan, said it would cut the wages of the men $17 to $21 a week. But they were polite. They invited His Honor to attend a mass meeting of the members at St. Nicholas Arena and present his proposal to the strikers. 5,000 of the mayor's constituents were on hand January 4th to greet him. A special chair was reserved in his honor. President Quill commented briefly on his absence.
We invited him to come here today and tell you workers what he knows about this plan. We asked him to come here and tell you what his transit wizards have been telling him. We rented the biggest damn chair in the city for him. And we have kept it here waiting for him. And he didn't show up. Now, since we got word that the mayor wasn't able to come because he had a meeting with the executive board of the Tulip Growers of America, And they have to be taken care of. But since he didn't come to us, I think we should pay him the honor of a visit, all of us together. Maybe we haven't done the best job in bargaining. Maybe the 8,200 strikers could make a greater impression. That has been our experience in the past. And now, your steering committee and your executive officers and board have recommended that the whole 8,200 men pay a visit to City Hall at 11:30 next Tuesday morning. Are you ready for a picket line at City Hall at 11 o'clock next Tuesday morning?
The late Allen Haywood, executive vice president of the CIO, condemned the mayor, placed the entire strength of national CIO squarely behind TWU in this strike.
Came to New York in 1937. And I helped with Mike and the other boys around here to get you your first contract in the IRT. And we've been in other struggles with you in these bus strikes. I want to say to you now, as we were then, anytime this union needs CIO, anytime it needs Allen Haywood in this picture, I'm going to be there in this kind of fight. I want to recommend to the mayor that he get down to the basis of common horse sense, that he call a conference based upon negotiating a contract, including a 40-hour week and no reduction in take-home pay. And this strike can be settled in no time if you do that. And if he doesn't do that, he's negligent in his duty to the people of New York.
On the fifth day of the strike, the papers were trying to fool the people. A sardine in a can may not know he's a sardine, but a human being in the overcrowded subways of New York knows he's a sardine. You can't fool him with a newspaper headline. Oddly enough, just a few days before, these same papers placed the blame for the strike right where it belonged, in the lap of the mayor. The consensus was responsibility for the strike rests squarely with the Board of Estimate and Mayor Impellitteri. January 6th, union officers met the mediators. The strikers kept their promise to visit the mayor. Joined by off-duty subway and city line workers, strikers heard their officers report at a mass rally in Murray Street in downtown New York. This demonstration gave a solid foundation to the union's position. We'll settle for nothing less than a 40-hour week with no loss in take-home pay. On the seventh day, Joseph Curran, National Maritime Union president, resigned as a mediator. He revealed to the press and the public the unprincipled stand of the companies, the confusion in the city government. He said the mayor and the candidates for mayor are making the lives and jobs of 8,200 workers a political football. January 8th, the strikers heard their officers' report, had their reply ready for the mayor. The membership was firm and united as Gustav Faber, International Secretary-Treasurer, called for the strike to go on and on until victory was won.
Brothers, I tell you one thing. As long as you guys come here to this hall in snow and storm and sleet, as long as you come here and we can report to you what we are doing. As long as you go and back yourself, there is no power in this state, in this city, in the world that's trying to take away from you what you were fighting for. And I thank you and God bless you.
John O'Donnell, TWU counsel, says the squeeze is on business.
But the greatest pressure now being brought to bear on the people responsible for this strike is coming from the business interests of this city that are losing and losing and losing. And with your spirit and courage will continue to lose until you win your 40 hours without loss of take-home.
Yes, business was feeling the squeeze. The Board of Trade, over 2,000 business firms, begged for an end to the strike. The companies were feeling the squeeze. The papers estimated the 9 private lines were losing $2 million a day. The strikers were feeling the squeeze. They were losing their patience. Suddenly, at the January 11th rally of over 4,000 members, there was a wild, spontaneous demonstration. The cry was to pull out the subways. Workers, provoked by the stalling of the companies, the fumbling and confusion of city officials, gave vent to their anger and bitterness. Newspapers, radio, and television carried the story and the pictures. The companies, the city, and the public, even the mayor, at last knew the union would not weaken. But the overburdened, undermanned subways weakened. January 12th, an overloaded express broke down. The Times Square station was roped off during the rush hour. The next day, the 13th of January, the enlarged Joint Executive Committee of the Union met at Transport Hall in a late-night secret session. Key people from the private lines and the city bus and subway system met to map out the strategy for the continuing strike. January 14th, at 146th Street, 1,000 subway workers joined fellow members on the picket lines. IRT workers gave up their lunch hour to encourage the men at the 146th Street Omnibus Garage. There was nothing to report at the January 15th mass meeting. John O'Connell, International Executive Board member, sums it up in a few words.
I wish I had a telegram either from the company or from the mayor that said we had a 40-hour week without loss of take-home pay, but I don't.
The strike was firm. The issue was deadlocked. The end was not in sight. On the 16th day of the strike, the workers at the 207th Street independent subway shops dramatized the key issue in the strike for the benefit of the newsreel cameras. With great ceremony, they laid the 48-hour week to rest before hundreds of cheering strikers at the Kingsbridge Garage. The strike was now 17 days old. The word to the press, the strike goes on. The strikers heard the same report the next day. Ellis Van Riper, Local 100 Secretary-Treasurer, called on the strikers to keep up the fight.
We've heard some of the learned gentlemen, quotation marks, in these companies who have pointed out various things such as inequities and the basis of establishing a rate of pay based on the majority of the operators in the city, completely ignoring the fact that the Board of Transportation for years was paying substandard wages and are still paying substandard wages, and rather than drag down the people who have better wages now to a substandard level, we're going to raise the men in the private lines and then bring the subways up on a level with them.
Mark Cavanaugh, International Executive Board member, pledges support from City Line workers.
We are behind you 100% because we realize
that your victory means victory for the Board of Transportation employees in their demands on the Board of Transportation.
R.J. Thomas pledges support of all CIO.
And I say to you, carry on the way you have been carried on, with the support of your fellow workers in the subway and with the support of the CIO, and you cannot lose. Thank you.
The next day, the New York City CIO Council threw its full support behind TWU, made plans for a mass labor rally at Madison Square Garden. One after another, representatives of 500,000 CIO members stood up to pledge time, money, and moral support to the striking busmen. Alan Haywood sent a telegram outlining conditions of arbitration. January 20th, an arbitration offer was made. It did not measure up.
We'll accept the proposals based on the stipulation given to us by Alan Haywood, Executive Vice President of National CIO. The important point in this stipulation is that the arbitrators agree to the principle of the 40-hour week for all the bus employees without any reduction in the present take-home pay. This afternoon, the companies refused to meet this stipulation, so the strike goes on, and the responsibility for the continuation of the strike rests squarely on the shoulders of the 9 companies involved.
For the 21st day in a row, 3.5 million New York bus riders traveled some other way. The subways were more crowded than ever, but the public-be-damned attitude of the companies in the city was beginning to crack. Except for Controller Lazarus Joseph. Who needs buses, he said. The subways are doing a wonderful job carrying all the people comfortably. The strikers expressed their opinion of Mr. Joseph at a January 22nd mass meeting.
We know what this means. It's a cheap political trick on the part of Joseph's. It's nothing but a strike-breaking movement. You'd expect that from the companies, but hardly from a man that's controller of the city of New York. And I brand him now for what he is, a stooge of the companies and a strikebreaker.
General Counsel John O'Donnell told the men exactly where things stood at this hour.
I can't do anything except on the instructions of the officers of this union. And the officers of this union are instructing me in the way that they feel that you want. And that is to bring back no document, that doesn't recognize your right to the 40 hours without loss of take-home, and that doesn't recognize the right to retroactivity in the award. I can only tell you this. I'm not going to try in those conferences to throw in any unnecessary obstacles. As soon as those gentlemen realize that this union means business, that there is no way by which they can chisel away what you want, then perhaps they will sit down and write down those simple words and put their names to it. When they do that, I'll bring the document back, but until they do that, there'll be no document and no agreement.
January 23rd, as the TWU pickets continued their day and night march, as the strike remained solid, officers of the union carried on round-the-clock negotiations in an effort to hammer out a settlement. January 24th, another day with still no break in the deadlock. January 25th, the 3.5 million bus riders jammed the subways for the 25th day in a row. Theodore Keel, former impartial transit arbitrator, interrupted his vacation, flew back to the city. January 26th, Keel moved to break the stalemate, tried to bring the union and the companies together. January 27th, finally there was a break in the strike. The language of agreement was spelled out. The Union Executive Board recommended the stipulation for arbitration, that it be voted on by secret ballot. Wednesday, January 28th, the plan for settlement was recommended to the membership. It was their choice to vote it up or vote it down in the democratic way. From 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., the voting took place under supervision of the American Arbitration Association. When the ballots were counted, the yes vote was overwhelming. With this overwhelming membership vote, the pattern for strike settlement was laid down as reported by President Quill.
We are now signing a stipulation for arbitration between the Transport Workers Union and the Third Avenue Railway and Surface Transportation Companies. This is subject to the approval of the Federal Court this afternoon and to the approval of the Executive Board of Local 100 tonight. If all these companies will meet the stipulation for arbitration, it is reasonable to expect that the buses will start to roll after midnight.
The strategy was to divide and conquer. It succeeded. 11:30, Avenue B and East Broadway signed the agreement. 12:05, Triborough Coach and Jamaica buses. 12:50, Queens Nassau and the Queensboro Bridge. 3:25, the Fifth Avenue Coach Corporation and New York City Omnibus gave up the battle, met the arbitration stipulation. This was the victory of a united union, a victory for all TWU. In this 29-day strike, TWU made the case for the 40-hour week in the transit industry. The rewards of that victory were great rewards. Retroactive pay, a 26.5 cent an hour wage increase, company-paid Blue Cross, totaling a 30-cent package. The 5-day, 40-hour week with no loss in take-home pay. A $2 an hour wage rate, the highest in the industry. A wage rate that is a floor for greater gains yet to come for Transport Workers Union members throughout the nation.